Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent enterprise software consulting firm that helps clients evaluate, select, and implement ERP and digital transformation solutions. And today I wanted to chat a bit about how to choose the right technology for your digital transformation. Now, this presentation is relevant whether you're going through a traditional ERP software selection or whether you're looking for CRM systems, HCM, perhaps you're looking at potential BI or analytical tools to help your enterprise, or maybe some combination of all the above. It could also be that you're looking for more modern technologies associated with Internet of Things or artificial intelligence, Industry 4.0, or again, maybe it's a combination of all the above. But regardless of what you're looking for, or perhaps you don't know what you're looking for yet, I wanted to provide a framework here today for how you can evaluate your potential software solution options. And this process and this framework is very important, even more so in today's landscape, given how fragmented it is with the proliferation of ERP systems as well as best of breed and point solutions that specialize in certain things, especially as you get into some of these new technologies around blockchain and artificial intelligence and CRM, HCM, all these different types of solutions that can be overwhelming to evaluate. This framework provides a process for how to navigate those potential solutions and find the solution that's the best fit for your organization. Now, before we start talking about specific technology, it's important to back up first and look at what is your overall digital strategy. And when we help clients through their digital strategy process, we're helping them through 6 different work streams that range from addressing the business process side of things, the people side of things on the organizational change side, enterprise apps, which addresses the technology, as does solution architecture, as you look down the left side of your screen here. And then we also look at business intelligence and analytics, as well as project quality assurance. So those are 5 major work streams with some distinct activities that typically happen during the phase of defining what a client's digital strategy is. And we have other presentations and frameworks that dive into this in more detail and unpack some of these different steps in the process. But what I really want to focus on here today is the enterprise apps portion of this, which is the 3rd work stream that you see listed on this screen. And we're gonna dig into this in a little bit more detail and define how it is that we help organizations through that process and how we would recommend most organizations tackle this challenge. So when we look at a high level, what we do with clients, we're first of all helping them define their overall digital strategy. And that was the previous slide that addressed the various work streams, those 6 work streams that I just talked through. And in that stage, we're helping define what the strategic goals are, and more importantly, translate those strategic goals into IT or enterprise software digital transformation objectives that can guide us and provide some parameters or some rails for how we evaluate and select the right technology for our organization. And then we get into the current state assessment in terms of understanding what is the current situation in terms of the current operations, the current technologies, the pain points associated with. We also want to understand what the secret sauce is of our organization. What are those things that give us competitive advantage, or those things that we want to make sure we preserve and don't lose in the process of looking for potential new technology. And then we get into the future state documentation. So we define what those business requirements are going forward. And these 2 steps right here, the current state and the future state documentation, it really varies in terms of how deep we go with clients or how deep you might want to go as part of your evaluation process. We have some clients who have a pretty good sense of what their needs are and want to do kind of a quick hit or a flyby overview of some of those higher priority requirements. And other clients will want to spend more time on defining what their future state is going to be and focusing more on re-engineering some of their business processes. And I have a slide here I'll cover here in just a second that dives into that in a bit more detail. So it really depends here how much time and effort you want to spend as part of your evaluation in this current state and future state process. But regardless of what you do, you want to make sure that you're defining those most important higher priority requirements and using those as the primary drivers for what enterprise software or digital transformation technology you might be looking for. And then we use that future state documentation to translate that into demo scripts, into kind of an RFI, RFP process And then we get into the solution evaluation, looking at a long list and a short list, and quickly narrowing down to what are those handful of technologies that provide the best fit based on those highest priorities. Now, one thing I'll say about this whole RFI process all the way through the solution evaluation, getting to that short list, is it shouldn't be that complicated. I've published a lot of thought leadership videos, blogs, and white papers around how too often companies, and especially their consultants, get bogged down in this whole process of creating really detailed RFIs, exhaustive requirements that are largely irrelevant to the evaluation process, and really focusing on those 20%, those top 20% of requirements that are the key differentiators for your organization and or the competitive advantage that you want to make sure that you're preserving and that your technology can help support. So really quickly getting there is important, and finding the right consultants to help you through that process is important, because the traditional consultants, or most consultants in the space that don't know the breadth of systems out there and best practices in your industry, are typically going to spend too much time spinning wheels trying to figure out what the exhaustive list of requirements are, and you're going to have kind of a watered down evaluation process as a result. So getting to that short list quickly is important. And then from there, you dive into the deep dive with demonstrations where we do the demo scripts, the more detailed RFPs, and then ultimately we select software based on a number of factors. You look at the functional analysis and comparison of how the different options compare to one another, the trade-offs, the pros, the cons. We look at references, we validate the technical aspects, and then we obviously look at the business case as well. And then from there, we go into negotiations and help define what the best economic solution is for whatever vendor or vendors it is you might be looking at or choosing. Now, in parallel with this whole structured evaluation approach are the two things you see on the left and the right side of the screen. On the left side, you see organizational change management, which typically should start during your evaluation process, and I'll talk a bit about that here in just a second. And then you have your system integrator selection, where once you've narrowed down your solutions, you're also looking at who's the right system integrator to help you implement from a functional and technical perspective. Even in situations where clients are using us to manage the implementation, to manage implementation readiness, the organizational change, providing project management support, etc., you still need someone that specializes in whatever software it is you provide or that you choose. Now, one thing I'll note about this slide is you look at this, and quite frankly, this isn't rocket science. There's nothing super unique about this. Obviously, it's not proprietary, or else I wouldn't be sharing it with you on YouTube video to the public. But what is key to this is how it gets executed. I think that's where a lot of companies and most consultants struggle, is executing effectively against this framework, and also being independent and objective and having a broad view of the marketplace is extremely critical. And that's, again, some areas where you might want to dive into understanding what your consultant can provide you with those criteria. So this is the general framework that we use. How you execute is critical, but this is a way to get you to that narrowed down technology or set of technologies that might best fit your organization. One last thing before we move on from this slide, it's important not just to limit your view to traditional ERP systems. I know a lot of clients we work with will say, hey, we're a big company, we just want to look at SAP or Oracle, or we're a mid-sized manufacturing company, we are a food and beverage manufacturer, whatever the case may be, we want to look at, say, Microsoft Dynamics and Infor and Epicor. So those are great solutions, but you also want to look at what else can we be using either within that vendor's ecosystem to support your overall digital transformation, or perhaps there's other vendors that can provide technology that augments your core enterprise software solution. So that's one of the key differences or key things you want to keep in mind as you go through your evaluation process. Now, looking at this same slide, but breaking it down a bit, one thing that we find with clients is they don't necessarily know that they're ready to go through the entire evaluation and selection. So typically what we see oftentimes, especially for companies that are either cost conscious, or they're not sure if the board or the management team is going to approve a project, or if they're not sure if they're going to really move away from their incumbent software vendor or provider, will provide a checkpoint at some point in the evaluation process where we look at what that potential shortlist looks like, what the potential total cost of ownership might look like for those different options, what the potential ROI might be, and doing an analysis of, are we ready to move on into a more full-blown evaluation process, or do we want to stick to the path of either going down the path of our incumbent solution, or maybe there's another non-technology replacement type solution that we could be pursuing, such as process improvements and basically getting more out of our current technology. So that's one way that companies that we work with will oftentimes break this up into more bite-sized chunks, this whole evaluation process, which can take, anywhere from a couple months for a smaller organization to upwards of 9 months or more for a large global organization with multiple locations. So a lot of times companies want to break that down a little bit and be able to have a checkpoint where they can go get board approval or management approval or whatever the case may be before moving forward with the full-blown evaluation. Now, if we come back to the digital strategy slide that we were looking at early on, you remember that we really focused our discussion just now on this whole enterprise apps work stream, the third box on your screen. Now I want to talk a little bit about business process management. How does the whole business process piece fit within our evaluation and selection process, which is that top layer here that you see on this slide. So if we take that top layer and really unpack that piece of it, we look at how we address business process management. And this is the entire tool set, if you will, or the entire framework that we have at our disposal when going through a process like this. The question will be, how much of this do we want to focus on now during the evaluation versus how much of this do we do during kind of the pre-implementation as we're getting ready for potentially implementing the solution. And most of the time, it's a combination of both. Typically, you're doing some degree of this during the evaluation, and then you're going to do another iteration in more detail once you know what the technology is and you start to dive into the specific workflows. So what we do here when we're looking at business process management is, first of all, define what the business goals are. What are our business objectives? What drives value within our organizations? What are our core competencies? And how do we ensure that our operations are aligned with our overall strategy? And where are the points of misalignment, which leads into the second box on the screen here, which is identifying the pain points. So where are we inefficient? Where are we misaligned? Where could we improve? Where do we have a potential foundation for new processes? And from that then leads into mapping new business processes. What does that future state look like? How do we address those inefficiencies, better align with business goals, improve our future state? And then from there, we look at how do we quantify benefits. So what are those soft and tangible benefits of improving our processes, which obviously feeds into our business case. And then taking the business case and benefits one step further, getting down to the second row or the bottom row of your screen, that gets into how we define KPIs and metrics. So how are we going to measure benefits going forward? What's our benefits realization plan? How do we ensure that those metrics are aligned with our BI and analytics requirements? So how we're going to deploy the use of BI tools, either within our core ERP system or perhaps it's a third-party business intelligence tool as well. And then from there, we start to transition into the organizational change side of things, which is what are the process changes, how are they going to affect people, and start to inventory what that impact will be and how we're going to address those changes via our organizational change strategy and plan. And then finally, kind of running in parallel with all this is defining risks. So what are the risks to all these changes we're talking about? Because although we're all excited about these changes, it's a way to transform our business model and really truly take that quantum leap in improvement for our business. There's risk that goes along with that. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our eyes wide open, identifying what the risks are and how we're going to address those risks. So with that, we do all this process work that provides an input into our future state requirements, our digital strategy and roadmap, the organizational change plan, and then the interim business process improvement plan. In other words, what are those process improvements that we can be deploying now even before we start leveraging new technology, which in our experience, it's anywhere from about 30 to 50% of process improvements that we define can be rolled out now as a way to get immediate ROI, but also as a way to ease the transition from an organizational change management perspective. Cool. And then finally, want to get into the second box here on this same slide again, which is focused on organizational change management. And more specifically, how do we address organizational change management here at this point in our software evaluation and selection process? And the key to organizational change at this step in the process is the organizational assessment, and that's the part that we'll talk about here for a second. So when we're looking at kind of that phase 1, phase 2 within your evaluation, if you recall, a lot of companies will have a checkpoint and kind of break their evaluation or selection into 2 phases. You may end up having just one big phase 1, but if you do break it out and if you combine them, these are the different activities that happen within that evaluation. So we're starting to look at your executives and stakeholders and how they will be affected. Organizational readiness surveys and focus groups is an important part of the process. And then we also start to look at organizational impact. What is the impact that this is going to have on the organization? What is the impact on organizational design, your culture, your benefits realization plan? All that stuff that you see around the outer edges of the circle are things that come out of that organizational readiness and organizational change strategy that we define during that evaluation piece. The point here isn't to start executing necessarily that much on the side of organizational change, but we do need to understand what the breadbox is, how big of a change this is going to be, and what our overall strategy is to help migrate people within our organization from where we are today, where we're headed in the future, and that ultimately becomes an input into your overall implementation, transformation strategy. And most of the time, we find that people issues or the organizational change work stream is what is on the critical path of determining how quickly that you can go through the transformation. So a lot of times executives will say to us, hey, why do we need to even really think about organizational change management now? We just want your help defining what the new technology is going to be. And then from there, we'll figure out how we're going to implement. My response to that is that it's hard to objectively evaluate your options and objectively assess whether or not you should move forward with a certain technology or a certain set of tools for your digital transformation without understanding what the impact on people are. So just to kind of close out this thought and this whole framework here is, what are the tips for a successful evaluation? What are the key things to keep in mind as you go through your evaluation process? First is to make sure you're matching software to critical requirements and key differentiators. Again, it gets back to that point of don't let a less experienced or a biased consulting firm take you down a bunch of rabbit holes of defining thousands of business requirements that will be important someday potentially during your design and implementation phase. In some cases, I've seen a lot of consultants that go completely down rabbit holes that are completely irrelevant even to the design of your software. But instead, you want to make sure that your consultants are focused on critical requirements and key differentiators. It should be those 20% of things that are really going to differentiate potential options for you. You don't want to waste time on non-essential requirements. You also want to make sure that price isn't the only determining factor. Typically, we find that there's a lot of parity between the different enterprise technologies. At the end of the day, even if the list prices are all over the map and one option looks to be a lot more expensive than another or vice versa, typically through the negotiation process that we help our clients through, you can create a lot of parity there, or kind of a level playing field from a cost perspective. And not only that, but you want to make sure you're looking not only at vendor costs, but what are those hidden costs around integration or having to staff up your IT staff to support a certain type of technology, or bringing in outside consultants, all that good stuff. And then you also want to define and validate a business case. Look for the best fit, not a perfect fit. That's really important because there is no perfect fit out there. Beware of vendors or consultants that say there is, because there's not. So you want to make sure you find that best fit and understand where it has gaps. So even the solution you choose or solutions you choose, there's going to be gaps, there's going to be risks, and we need to figure out how to best address those. And then finally, you want to make sure you don't get too caught up in best practices. Software vendors love to sell the concept of industry best practices or pre-configured industry solutions. It's pretty rare that most of that works for a given organization. It's always nice to know that it has functionality that can support your organization or your business processes. But at the end of the day, your organization has a unique DNA. It has a unique operational model. There's certain things that you do that you don't necessarily want the software dictating to you. So you want to make sure that you define what those processes are to let those processes drive the software. And then in certain areas that are more commodity business processes where maybe you don't need to be different than other organizations, that's where you can let kind of the standard off-the-shelf or out-of-the-box functionality drive the way you go through the transformation. So that is all we've got for today. I want to thank you for your time. And if you have questions about the content you see in this video, or if you'd like to chat more about it, I've got a lot more content behind this that I can share with you. Feel free to reach out. You can either call me or email me. My contact information is listed here. And then I also encourage you to follow me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, and or subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I hope you're all having a great day and look forward to chatting with you soon. Take care.